have Debasis Sadangi in the second session on the philosophy of George Berkeley. He will be speaking on the subjective idealism of Berkeley and Solipsism that he arrived at. So, if I look into the profile of Debasis Sadangi, I find that he is serving as a lecturer in Ellen Mahavidyalaya, Jamuli, Baleswar. He is also a PhD scholar working on the Buddhist theory of embodied cognition in IIT ISM Dhanbad. So he is both active in his teaching work and also his research and his research. So if we look into him, I find that he has passed his master's degree from from Banaras Hindu University in 2015. So definitely, since Banaras Hindu University is very much popular for Indian philosophy, and what I see in his profile that he has a great affinity for Buddhist philosophy, because many of the research articles that he has published are on Buddhist philosophy and more on Dharmakirti. Okay, so he's working a lot on Dharmakirti. So his research areas include, he says, it is on Indian logic and epistemology, and also he is much interested in the philosophy of mind and cognition. So he got Bhavananda Datta Memorial Essay Award by the Indian Philosophical Congress in 2015. He was the central sector. He was getting the scholarship from central sector scheme from 2010 to 15. From 2016 to 19, he was teaching assistant in IIT ISM Dhanbad. So I also see in Debasis Sadangi that he has participated in a number of seminars and workshops. So and also he has participated in one refresher course. So I see that in Debasis that he is a teacher and also a researcher and lot of interest in Indian logic. Now today we have him to speak on the philosophy of George Berkeley, especially on the subjective idealism and solipsism. So I request Sri Debasis Sadangi to present his lecture. Over to Sri Debasis Sadangi.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words, and my namaskar to all. First of all, I want to express my thanks and gratitude to the convener of this philosophy family, Pramod sir, coordinators, K. Om Narayan Rao sir, Kailash sir, and Patit Pawan Das sir, and all the teachers, scholars, and students, and my friends. So thank you very much for giving me a chance to share something with you. So I will present something on subjective idealism and solipsism. Before that, since last few days, we have observed from pre-Socratic philosophy to Socratic philosophy and post-Socratic philosophy, then some of the part of medieval philosophy, and also modern philosophy from Descartes to some part of Berkeley. So we see here that the development of the ideas from the pre-Socratic period to Socratic period and the modern period, how the ideas are developing from that day to this day. So ideas are, this is the development of the ideas, I'll say, rather than the history of philosophy. So what is the job of a philosopher? So what will a philosopher do? What will a philosopher search? The job of a philosopher, as remarked by Krishnachandra Bhattacharya, is to search for the self-evident to provide the self-evident elaboration of the self-evident, the bare truth. So everybody in their own way tries to discover or try to present the truth. So in that way, many philosophers comes, and now we have reached to Berkeley. So Berkeley is famously known for his subjective idealism, refutes the materialism. Materialism is the belief that matter only exists. There is there is no assistance of God in this idea. So what is subjective idealism? Subjective idealism is a theory that external world does not have real existence independent of perceiving minds. Berkeley calls his position as immaterialism rather than idealism. Berkeley rejects materialism because it promotes skepticism and atheism. My co-speaker Narayan Behra sir has already told about this. So I will not repeat all these things. I'll just say and come to my main part. So skepticism, because our senses mislead us to the nature of the material things, and atheism, because a materialist believes material world can exist without the concept of God. So what is Berkeley's project? So the Berkeley's project of immaterialism implies three things. First is refutation of material substratum, refutation of the distinction between primary and secondary qualities, refutation of abstract ideas. Again, the first one, refutation of material substratum, implies is material substances are combination of sensible qualities. Second, ideas we perceive are thing in themselves. There is nothing beyond sensation. Every reality is psychic. That's why he's told that assessed perceiving. To be is to be perceived. So this is the whole idea, the whole project of Berkeley to refute materialism and to establish immaterialism. In order to that, he has refuted his previous philosophers who have enumerated materialism. Actually, Berkeley was a bishop, and at that time, the scientific temperament was high, and everybody used to believe that only matter only exists, or material thing is the only, there is no assistance of God, or God has no role in the world. So Berkeley tries to establish his immaterialism. So he goes to subjective idealism, and he speaks about subjective idealism and solipsism. Then what is subjective idealism? The word idealism has not certain a particular definition of idealism. Idealism has been used in different philosophies in different contexts. So in Berkeley has used in one sense, and in case of Plato, the idealism is different in sense. In case of Kant, suppose in transcendental idealism, the word idealism has different meaning. And here, subjective idealism, as I have already told you, that everything is mind dependent. If everything is mind dependent, then does it mean that my mind only exists? Is it only the thing that my mind only exists, or other mind also exists? So then the next question is, what about the nature or world if I cease to exist? If I will not be there, then who will perceive this world? So these charges leads to the solipsism. Solipsism means my mind only exists. So, so in order to avoid the solipsistic charge, Berkeley's response all this question, and by introducing God, Berkeley resolves the threat of solipsism. If finite minds create cease to exist, the world will exist in eternal mind, the mind of God. If my mind cannot perceive something, then there are other mind who will perceive. If other mind cannot perceive, then the eternal God will perceive them. So this theory, the subjective idealism, criticized in many ways by many philosophers, but most eminent them and most chief among them is Moore, who criticized Berkeley's subjective idealism as insufficient analysis. Perception involves two things: the act of perceiving and the object perceived. The sensation blue includes the seeing blue and the sensed blue. Here, the seeing act is mental, but sensed blue exists in its own and is non-mental. So Moore refuted his Berkeley's philosophy in this way. So in the second part, this is all about the subjective idealism sir has already discussed about, and I have just read it them and put in the argumentative format. So in the second part, we'll compare it with the Indian philosophical tradition, how Indian philosophical tradition sees the subjective idealism and what kind of answer we there, and the comparative approach of Indian idealism and Western idealism, Berkeley's subjective idealism. So the famous idealist of the of India, from the Indian philosophy is Yogachara Vijnanavada. Yogachara Vijnanavada claims that the consciousness only exists, or mind only exists, just like Berkeley. So, as we know, the development of Buddhism comprises three different phases, namely the early realistic phase and pluralistic, the middle critical and negativistic, the later idealistic phase, the Yogacara Buddhism. So, there are the Abhidharmika philosophy, which is realistic, the Madhyamika Sunyavada, which is hello. Hello, is there any problem? Yeah. So there are Madhyamika philosophy, whose philosophy is known as critical, and Yogachara Vijnanavada, whose philosophy is known as the idealistic. So the suppose if we look at this criticism of Moore, so how will a idealist reply to this answer? So if we see from the Indian philosophical tradition, there is an argument from the Yogachara Buddhist tradition that the Sohopalamba Niyama, or refutation of realism by the idealist. But the cases, in case of Buddhist philosophy and in the cases of Western philosophy are different, though they are refuting the realist. For them, the realists are the previous philosophers like Locke and Descartes. But for the Yogachara Buddhism, their Purvapaksha is always Nyaya philosophy or the Sautantrika philosophy, those were realist. Anyway, so how they will answer this question, that the blue and the consciousness of blue are identical. The blue and the consciousness of blue are identical. They are not different. Sohopalambha niyamat veda nilatadiya. The blue and the consciousness of blue are not different. For the Yogachara, consciousness is the sole reality. The so-called empirical world is only a system of ideas. The object is only apparent. It is just like the Berkeley's sense, and is really identical with its cognition. The two content and cognition are invariably perceived together. and are therefore identical. If the content is different from cognition, it should have been capable of being perceived apart from the latter. Difference presupposes separateness or availability separately, which is lacking here. The realist, however, maintain the independence of the content known. Conscious for the realist is like light, whose function is to reveal the object, but not to affect it in any other way. Perception is ontologically neutral for the realist. If to be perceived implied also to be altered, we could not say that we perceive the same object we perceived before. The content would have changed in the process of being known. If the modification were only partial, how are we going to distinguish the two parts, one of which remains unaltered and other is modified? Being perceived is only an accident in the life of the object. It is perceived but need not be perceived. There is an absolute identity of the object in its two states, first unperceived and then perceived. But according to the Yogacara school of Buddhism, knowledge is not a mere discovery of something that already exists, an unassertable proposition, but is creative. It creates and projects its own content. Consciousness and its object are not two different things at all. There is no blue, but only the idea of blue. The essay of blue is its perceiving. The essay of blue is its perceiving. So the blue and the consciousness of blue are not different but are identical. So how the Buddhists are representing their idealism? So first, there are no things, artha. There are no things, artha. We know about the artha kriya karitva theory that they said in Pramanavartika Dharma, they said, artha kriya karitvam yat tat atra paramartha sat. That which is causal efficacy, that is only the transcendental real, means by the only the name of water, it cannot quench our thirst. By only naming the fire, it cannot burn us. So if someone burns, then it must be called fire. If someone quench our thirst, then it must be told as water. So only minds or chitta and mental quality chaitas exist. So Vigyapti Matra Sat. Consciousness only exists. Vasubandhu enumerated this theory in his famous Vigyapti Matrata Siddhi. So consciousness, Vijnana, arises in the appearance of things, sentient beings, self or Atman, and ideas, Vigyapti. Its external object, Artha, does not exist, and because of the non-existence of the eternal object, mind itself is false, Asat. This is said in the Madhyanta Vibhaga Lakshana Paricheda, sloka number 3. Suppose, so what is the meaning of this thing that the consciousness arises in the appearance of things, sentient beings, self, and ideas, Vigyapti, its external object, Artha, does not exist, and because of the non-existence of the eternal object, mind itself is false or asat. So in the first verse of the Madhyanta Vibhaga Shastra Lakshana Paricheda is saying that Abhuta Parikalpasti Dvayam Tatra na Vidyate Sunyata Vidyate Tatra Tasyam Apisa Vidyate. False ideation or Abhuta Parikalpa exists. Duality does not exist in it. However, emptiness, Sunyata, does exist in the false ideation. The false ideation also exists in emptiness. So the absolutism accepted by Berkeley is not in the same sense accepted by the Buddhist. These are accepted in two different sense. So here, there the absolute means the sunyata, and in the case of Berkeley, it is the God. So in Buddhism, there is no concept of God. Lastly, is like the subjective idealist. They are giving the three nature of the self in his Vasubandhu's famous three swabhava nirdesa. The three nature of things are the parikalpita, paratantra, and parinispanna. Parikalpita means fabricated, paratantra means dependent, and parinispanna means perfected. The first two, parikalpita and paratantra, are related to samrit sat or conventional reality. In Sankara's sense, you can say the Vyavaharika Satta, and perfected or Parinispanna, perfected, is related with the Paramarthika Sat or transcendental reality. So the wise understand in depth the three natures. What appears is the dependent, how it appears is the fabricated. So what appears is the dependent nature. How it appears is the fabricated nature because of being dependent on condition, because of being only fabrication. In the second line, he's saying the eternal non-existence of the appearance as it appears, that is known to be perfected nature because of being always the same. The third argument he is giving, what appears there? The unreal fabrication, how does it appear? As a dual self. What is its non-existence, that by which the non-dual reality is there? So, in that case, we can say that, like if we go to the previous slide, that Berkeley's idealism, that Berkeley resolves the threat of solipsism by introducing the concept of God, by advancing the Sunyata theory. They also avoid the solipsistic theory, and and also the other thing, if we look the arguments here and we compare with this slide, then you can find this similarity, and a little bit of difference is of course there, but the form of idealism, both in Indian Buddhist philosophy and Berkeley's, are not different. Professor Ashok Kumar Chatterjee has written on this regards a Buddhist theory of idealism in this famous book. So idealism, both in East and West, goes in a same argumentative way. This is all about the subjective idealism, both in the Berkeley's philosophy and in Buddhist idealism. So these are the references of the books. So thank you for patience hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Debasis Sarangi, for not only explaining Berkeley's subjective idealism and solipsism, but also interlinking it with the Buddhist philosophy. As I said earlier, that you're working on Buddhist philosophy, and we have tried to relate this with the Buddhist ideas. So it's a great effort to bring about a comparison between the Western and the Eastern trends. So over to thank you for your nice presentation. Now over to Mrs. Nivedita Priyadarshani to carry on the question and answer session. Please take the questions in the chat box and put those questions before the speaker. Over to
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Nivedita.
Thank you, sir. Uh, Thank you, Devasi sir, for your nice presentation. Um, the first question is asked by Patito Babat sir. It is about a small query. Can we really brand Buddhism as idealistic philosophy?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, of course. Because when we see these things that everything is mind dependent, as I have already said, that when we are talking about the Vijnanavada, but if you take any of the Yogachara philosophers, be it Vasubandhu, be it Dharmakirti, and be it any of the Yogachara philosophers, they are the idealist in itself. And I have also presented some of the arguments for that, like the three Swabhava, and also the difference between the absolutism in Berkeley's sense and the different sense presented in Yogachara philosophy.
Okay, thank you. Uh, and another question is by Nanda Ghosa. Uh, in Buddhism, it is pro waves like, but in Berkeley case, how idealism be discussed if we take into consideration ex nihilo nihilo fit.
See, it is means that they have also categorized consciousness. There are three kinds of consciousness they have discussed. That is the Ala Vijnana, Pravriti Vijnana, and also Monovijnana. So Ala Vijnana means the storehouse of the consciousness. So though there everything is in a state of flux, but this is not that Ala Vijnana is permanent. Ala Vijnana is also changing, but this is the storehouse of the consciousness. So this is not the case that ex nihilo nihil fit.
Okay. Okay. This is also by say Patitavan sir. Repeat of this previous question. What about the views of Theravadins regarding this?
Oh, sorry, sir. Actually, I don't know. I have not much reading from the Theravada Buddhist side. I have not read the Pali Buddhist side. Only the Sanskrit Buddhist side. Sanskrit Buddhism. It's the Mahayana Buddhism. I'm sorry for
Okay.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sir. This is by Manaswini Patnaik. So, what is three Swabhava Nirdesh?
Trisabhava Nirdesa is the magnum opus of Basavandhu's work. Actually, Basavandhu has written this text, Trisabhava, Parikalpita, Paratantra, and Parinispanna. The world is fabricated, imagined, Parikalpita, Paratantra, it is dependent, and Parinispanna.
Okay. Thank you, sir. The next question is by Ratnakar Gajendra, sir. Uh, can you explain the distinction between human and divine perception?
Yeah, there are four kinds of perception categorized by the Yogacara Buddhist. One is Indriya Pratyaksha, another one is the Manasa Pratyaksha, third one is the Swasambedana, and the fourth one is the yogic perception. The yogis are normally treated as in the Indian philosophy, just like the Nyaya also, that they are Trikaladarshi. They can perceive all the past, present, and future. So through the yogic power, they have acquired some supernatural some power. So they have enriched their consciousness. That's why they can know past, present, and future.
Uh, okay, sir. Um, Another question is by Rasmi Prabha Mahanti, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. I'm seeing here.
Uh,
In,
is Berkeley a solipsist, and what is the solipsist view of self?
no, solipsism is the view that my mind only exists or myself only exists. But this is not the Berkeley's position. Berkeley has refuted these things by accepting the concept of God, the concept of absolute. So it is not possible that Berkeley is accepting this theory. Yeah.
Uh, Next question is by Amrita Haldar, ma'am. Uh, she asked if Berkeley is free from solipsism, so what is the position of God in his philosophy?
So he told that that if to be is to be perceived. So to be means if I will not perceive, then who will perceive? If I cease to exist, then who will perceive this thing? Then he told that the other mind will perceive. Then if other mind will not be there, if nobody perceives, then he told that the eternal thing or the God will perceive.
The next question is also by Patita Pavan sir. Who is Purva Paksha for Buddhist idealism?
Purvapaksha, of course, the Nyaya realist and in some time and sometime the Sautantrika. Sautantrika and Vaibhasika, both the Theravada, because they are realist in their position. Sautantrika basically, Nyaya and Sautantrika, basically Nyaya and sometimes Sautantrika also.
Okay. Another question is by Manoj Srini Patnaik. Is solipsism denies other existence?
Solipsism denies
Denies other existence.
yeah, denies other existence. Mind means mental, psychological, other psychological existence. Uh,
Okay. Okay, sir. The next question is by Antaryami Dixit. If there is no physical object outside the mind, then how is the hallucinatory or illusory experiences different from the real experiences?
See, I have to understand that if there is
No
no physical object outside the mind,
mind.
then how is the hallucinatory or illusory experiences differ from the real experiences? See, in case of hallucination or illusion, this is not the real experience, right? So in case of some defects in the indriyas, or in case of the suppose the Buddhist have given an example. When you are going in a boat, you see the trees are moving, but really the trees are not moving, you are moving. But the thing is that you are not seeing in the exact way. That's why they appears to you as illusory. They appear to you as illusory. So the illusory is an appearance only. So we have to not to go by the appearance only. So that's why we have to only focus on the not on the external object but the ideas itself, the true ideas.
Okay, sir. Thank you. This is from Pramod Kumar Das, sir. He wants that you give a concluding remark on Berkeley's philosophy without referring to Buddhism.
Yeah. So if we go to these slides, then yeah, Berkeley's philosophy actually. Judge Berkeley was bishop of the science. Ceylon was one of the great philosophers of the early modern period. Was a brilliant critic of his predecessors like Descartes and Locke. He was a talented metaphysician, famous for defending the idealism, that is, the view that reality consists exclusively of mind and their ideas. Berkeley's system, while it struck many as a counterintuitive, is strong and flexible enough to counter most objects. Sir has already told in in the previous lecture, his most famous work are the treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge and the three dialogues between Hylas and the Philonous. They are beautifully written and defended by Berkeley. And most famously, Berkeley's immaterialism made him famous. Means Berkeley's immaterialism is the unique idea which he gives to the idea. If you put one step in the ideas of philosophy. So she proclaimed that one thing I know I am not guilty of. I, I do not pin my faith on the sleeves of any great man. I act not out of prejudices and presupposition. I do not adhere to any opinion because it is an old one, a received one, a fashionable one, or one that I have spent much time in the study and cultivation. In this, if we look at these things, then we may see that how he is passionate about his philosophy, his idea that this is the uniqueness, the brilliancy of his philosophy. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for your clear explanation. The next question is by Rasmi Prabha Mahanti. Uh, According to Solipsism, self is psychological or empirical?
Psychological.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. The next question is by Dr. Nrsingacharan Samantarai, sir. If ultimately God is there, who perceived everything which one cannot, how they Berkeley deny matter? I
If
think I want to.
ultimately God is there,
If
uh,
ultimately God is there,
uh,
who perceived everything? Which one can? Which one can? This will be the first question, I think. Then the next question: How then Berkeley deny matter? I think he
I,
has asked two questions.
okay, okay. I understand now. Actually, God is the means he's the eternal thing. Mean he's perceiving. The argument goes in this side in this way that if I will cease to exist, everything mind dependent, or everything is immaterial, depends on the ideas. If my mind cease to exist, if my mind will not perceive it, then who will perceive? Then the argument follows that the other mind will perceive it. If there will be, if the other mind also will not perceive this, he gives an example that suppose in a jungle, in a forest, the leaves falls, and suppose so who will see? I am not seeing. The other people are also not seeing in the deep forest. So who is seeing there? Then Berkeley replies that the God is seeing there. God is seeing there. So in that way, he established the absolute in this way that he perceives everything. So, in order to avoid the solipsism and in order to avoid all these kinds of puzzles, he finally accepted the concept of God. Actually, when Berkeley asked are you in pain? So he always replied that no, I am in the idea of pain. So are you seeing something? Then he replies. No, I am just there is the idea of things. Always he puts that the core idea is the uh, main theme of the Berkeley's philosophy. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Um, I think this is all about the questions and answer session. Um, Thank you for your explanation and your presentation, sir. Um,
Thank you.
okay, sir. Thank you. Uh, Dr. K. Om Narayan, sir, will I end the session here?
Actually, I want to tell something that actually what should be the method of philosophy? What should be the method of philosophy? So in this case, I want to refer Daya Krishna, who always enumerated the Sambada method. The Sambada and Swaraja. This will be the method of philosophy, means through Sambada, the dialogues between the tradition, dialogue between East and West, and Swaraja means you put your ideas and dialogues between the separate traditions. This will enrich the philosophy. And I also appreciate, I accept this idea of the Krishna, that the Sambada method or Sambada and Swaraj method are the only methods in philosophy which can actually enrich our traditional philosophy, like Indian philosophy. So it is both from the East-West comparative philosophy or East-West collaborative philosophy. I think everybody knows about workplace philosophy. That's why I tried that. Buddhism should be there. People also should know about, student also should know about the Buddhist idealist. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, for giving me a chance here. Thank you, Nivedita madam. Thank you, Narayana Behra sir, Kev Narayana Rao sir, Patit Pawan sir, Kailash sir, and Pramod sir for giving me a chance to share my views. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you
day.
so much. Thank you so much. Um, Now we are at the end of the session. So, Kailash sir, will I end the session by giving vote of thanks?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Um, I must give my vote of thanks to both the speakers, uh, Dr. Narayan Behera and Mr. Devasri Sarangi, for their brilliant presentation. I must be thankful to our coordinator, Dr. K. Om Narayan sir, as well as Dr. Kailash Chandra Maharana sir, for his involvement in coordinating the session. And I must be thankful to Pramod sir, Patit Pawan sir, and Devasri Sharangi sir for your organizing such a beautiful platform to learn. Thank you. And also, I must give my vote of thanks to the uh, mm, uh, students who are participating in this session. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. And the session is now ended.
Thank you so much, Shaw.